The life of Deadwood's #1 madam and socialite. She coined the term cat house and put it to good use. Opening a string of brothels throughout South Dakota, befriending Calamity Jane, and providing her a refuge when it was most needed. All while being charitable and a mother of 2. Today's queen definitely provides us the good in the good, the bad, and the ugly of the wild, wild west.
I got something between my legs gonna make a dead man come. Oh, that. I got something between my legs gonna make a dead man come. Oh, that. I'm gonna turn back my mattress and let you all my springs. I want you to find me, daddy, till the bell do ring. Oh, daddy, want you to shade and dry.
Hello, my name is Summer, and this is Paying For It. Thank you for being here for episode 20. Today, we will be diving into a very successful madam and a woman of the 1800s, Dora Dufran. She was far above her time and proves that in her life story. But before we get to that, if you haven't already, please consider following, liking, or leaving a review. It helps out a lot here on Paying For It. And if you're really vibing with me and my spicy takes on history, please consider subscribing so you get access to the video versions, and they come out early on Sunday mornings. Anyways, with that, hello, how are you? I hope everyone had a great Memorial Day weekend and spent a lot of the time in the sun if that's your thing. I had 3 days off and loved it. Went to the lake on Tuesday, which we drove an hour away to get to this lake. And as soon as we got there, we had a nice little picnic. And we got into the water for about, I would say 5 minutes before a storm blew in. And it wasn't one you could just ignore either. It was like the whole shebang. You know, like if it just was like raining or drizzling or even just like raining hard, it was still 80 degrees out and I would have stayed in that motherfucking water. But instead, we get strong winds, thunder. Hey, boys, are we being nice? I'm trying to record. Strong winds, thunder, and lightning, which you know you have to get out of the water when it comes to lightning. My cats are fighting right now, so if you hear that, everyone's a little bit grumpy right now. We're a little edgy, or not edgy. We're a little temperamental right now because last night, hey, boys, I know, it's okay. Last night, our AC went out. I have no idea why, so that's great. But boys, he is not doing anything to you. He's just sitting up there. So it's very hot in this motherfucking house, hence why I'm just chilling in my sports bra today because Jesus Christ, it is hot. Worst time for the AC to go out because, you know, it is now like, hello, it's Texas. Memorial Day really brings in the heat, okay? So yeah, we went to the lake on Tuesday, got stormed out. That's okay though, because we drove the hour back, and when we got into my town, no storm in sight. So I just jumped into our apartment pool because I was like, listen, I bought a new bathing suit. I want to show it off. I want to be in my bathing suit in the water as much as possible. So that's what I'm going to do. Spent the next couple days just kind of relaxing at the pool and enjoying the sun, reading a lot. And yeah, so now we're back and our AC went out. And now we're all grumpy as fuck. My hair's a mess. You know, it's sticky in here. And so, yeah, pray for us that they come and fix this AC because I have some grumpy cats, if you can hear them. They aren't happy with each other because it's so fucking hot in here. Yeah, so that's pretty much the updates on me. But, you know, what has been up with y'all? I hope you guys are having a great day. I hope your AC is not out. And if this recording gets weird, it's because they came and knocked on my door, and I'm not gonna ignore them because we need some AC up in this place. Yeah. Anyways, yeah, that's that. I hope you guys are cooled off, not having such a hot moment as I am. And yeah, with that being said, you know what time it is. Grab yourself a cocktail, a mocktail, a coffee, whatever you fancy. Today, because it's so hot, I'm having a motherfucking beer, okay? I have to work later, but that's okay. One beer won't destroy anything. I feel like I have to knock on wood just in case. Anyways, we're doing a Shiner Olay. I'm not exactly sure if that's Olay or how to say it, but that's what we're doing. And honestly, this beer is so good for the summer. They rebranded this beer, and I'm mad about it because I really liked the name. So I will be referring to this beer forever and always as Shiner Cerveza. And yeah, if I can get it back into my little punk rock cozy, that would be great. I'm also excited today. My new backpack should be coming. It's a little ghost face backpack. I'll show it next episode if I remember. I will, hopefully. Yeah, I'm excited. I got it for my new pub. I get everything. This is just a way to spoil myself, I guess. I don't know. But I get like new bar keys and wine keys and like new equipment for every like new restaurant I start at. And this time I was like, you know what? I need a new little bag. So an excuse to buy pretty much a $70 bag. Yes. Do I care? No. I wanted it. And so she got it. Anyways, I'm drinking Shiner Cerveza today. And just to cool us off and get us in the mood. Whatever you have, though, today, I hope you are enjoying it. And let's open it. Cheers. And let's get into it, shall we? Nothing cools you off quite like a cold beer. Today, I'm taking you way back to the Wild Wild West of Deadwood, South Dakota. Now, I never even heard about Deadwood, South Dakota, but now I'm interested in going, of course. But, yeah, so we're going to South Dakota, Deadwood, South Dakota, to be exact. And today's queen started from the bottom like they all kind of do. And she was a dance hall girl, but very quickly moved up with her self-promotion to madam, opening her first house of what will soon to be a string of houses her and her husband will go on to open, creating an empire in selling sex. Just like a lot of our queens before and after her, she was very charitable and well respected in her community for her time. Well respected from most in her community, I should say. The proper ladies, they still did not like the fallen ones of their city, okay? So she was well respected by most. A true pioneer of the Black Hills, I'm excited to introduce you to Dora Dufran. Born Amy Helen Dorotha Balshar, what a name. Amy Helen Dorotha Balshall in Liverpool, England, to parents Joseph, John, and Isabel Balshall. I'm really trying with that last name, Balshar. Not long after her birth, her parents pack up everything and decide to migrate to the U.S. When Amy was just 1, her family landed in New Jersey in 1869. This is not where they stayed, though. In fact, Amy and her family did a lot of traveling around the U.S. before finding the right place for them. There's a cat outside my window. Eventually, Joseph and Isabella settle in the new capital of Nebraska, Lincoln City, around 1876 or 1877. This was considered a welcoming place for foreigners. It is said that the Balshalls soon became pretty prosperous in their new town, which at the time only had about 2,500 or so residents. A lot of the family's history and means to which they became prosperous is, of course, a mystery to history, just like much of Amy's childhood. In 1881, Amy is now 13 years old, and despite or maybe due to the fact that their parents were well off, I only say this because some articles didn't say this, but kind of made it as hinted that maybe the family's wealth was due to they didn't even really hint. Maybe I was just reading into it because I was confused on the wording. So I want to be clear here that it's me maybe just assuming that that's what the articles were hinting at, because they were like, we don't know why they got prosperous, but they were. And then, so yeah, it just seemed like they were hinting maybe they got prosperous off of selling sex. But I'm not going to put that out there. Oh, I just did, but that's just allegedly my opinion. I don't know. I don't know if that's the case or what in general, how they got their money. But anyways, at 13, Amy becomes a dance hall girl at one of the local saloons. What exactly is a dance hall girl? Good question. The simple answer is just girls that were hired in saloons as a form of entertainment for the men of that time. They would sell dances and help push liquor sales. A lot of the times, men would buy both him and the girl he was dancing with whiskey, and he would get a whiskey and he would pay full price for her whiskey, but her whiskey was going to be unsweetened tea because you're working, you can't get drunk, but he was still paying full price for that whiskey. The shade. A lot of the times nowadays, dance hall girls are often lumped into the category of prostitutes, which is so true because when you look into history, any girl who lived a vice life, we will say, was just lumped into a fallen angel, even if sex was never sold, However, that is why things get a little bit murky here because, a lot of the dance hall girls never once sold sex. They were just there to sell dances and push those liquor sales. They were making quite a good bit of money, and they got to dress up, wear fun clothes. So, yeah, a lot of the dance hall girls were just that, dance girls. On the other hand, some of the ladies who were dance hall girls definitely sold sex on the side as well. However, according to historians, it was never actually part of the job description. So, what I'm gathering is that dance hall girls over time have just been lumped into saloon girls or prostitutes and stuff like that. But a lot of them were not. They were just girls there to, dance, have a good time. You're a modern day shot girl almost. However, it's still important to note that the proper ladies definitely still turned their noses down to dance hall girls. They too would be lumped in to the fallen angels category, even back then, even if they weren't selling sex. That's because once you cross the line into vice, you just weren't someone with loose morals, I guess. So then you couldn't be proper. Just the hypocrisy of life, I guess. Didn't change back then either. So to summarize, most dance hall girls did not have to sell sex. In fact, most men made plenty of money without having to do so, without having to sell sex, However, some dance hall girls also saw the opportunity that presented itself with the job, and they acted upon it. A little side hustle. Extra money. Now, back to Amy. It is unclear to me if Amy, when working as a dance hall girl, sold sex. However, historians quite often comment on how she was a prostitute at a very young age of 13. But a lot of places just label her as a dance hall girl. So I am quite confused on what exactly happened here. Did she sell sex? Maybe. Most likely. It seems like it. But was she maybe just a dance hall girl with fancy dresses and danced with the men and sold liquor? That could also probably be possible. And I'm assuming maybe that was the case. That she may never have sold sex. One, unless her family did become prosperous off of her, which is insane. Why go into that life if you're already, unless your family is abusive? There's so many, it's a mystery to history on what exactly happened. But it is said and often commented that she was a prostitute. But when talking about those days, they always label her a dance hall girl. So it's a bit confusing because dance hall girls did not have to sell sex, but a lot of them did on the side. A little side hustle. Okay. So was that what she was doing? We aren't sure. Is that due to the murky idea of dance hall girls, or was it because as a dance hall girl, she seized the opportunity that was presented to her while working within the saloons? This is a mystery to history as well. That's okay, though. Either way, it doesn't affect her story that much. By the age of 17, Amy leaves her family and her home in Nebraska and moves to Rapid City, South Dakota, where she continues to work as a dance hall girl, entertaining the rugged cowboys of Rapid City. Because now we're in the Wild Wild West, baby. It isn't long before she drifts to Deadwood, South Dakota. It is here that Amy decides it's time that she gives herself a little promotion. See, in Deadwood, it was just discovered that this creek full of dead trees was also full of gold, baby, making it a huge hit for the cowboys at the time, for anyone trying to get money, honey. Why did I say that? Trying to get rich, really. This was a time for people to be really hitting it big off of the minerals of the world, okay? So she discovers, so over here, there's a little bit of gold, and we know what that means. Seeing the opportunity it was, Amy jumped on it, starting her new career as madam, selling sex to those lonely men coming to get rich. Enter her new identity. See, Amy as a dance hall girl always went as Amy. She never changed her name, which makes me lead to believe that she never actually sold sex. that she was just a dance hall girl. But as she entered into the sex trade as a madam, it's time for a new identity. Amy goes on to change her name to Dora, opening her first house where she is an instant success. Hard not to be. Soon after moving to Deadwood, she meets Joseph Dufran. He was a Black Hills pioneer. And Black Hills is the area which Deadwood which Deadwood is in. He also operated a freight hauling business, and of course, like many men of the West, loved to gamble. But unlike many men of the West, he seemed to be a true gentleman. On top of that, he knew Dora's career, knew of her past, whether that contained selling sex or not, and he didn't care. In fact, he had plans to help her grow her enterprise. Why I couldn't think of that word. Their relationship, according to what we know through history, was a good one. And in 1887, Dora and Joseph get married. So, even though he was a gambler, it doesn't seem like he was much of a drinker, which is good because back then there was no idea on how to limit yourself. There was no restrictions. Like, as a bartender, it is my responsibility to keep those who are intoxicated safe as much as possible. Not letting them go over not letting them go over a limit to where shit can happen. Once you have a drink, you start feeling loosey-goosey, you start relaxing, but after that third or fourth drink, things get a little, can get a little wonky if you're not careful. So it's always important to be careful, to have someone to, watch out for you. But also back then, it just wasn't a thing. People were drinking until they legitimately dropped. Okay, so it just, no limits. They had some drinkers. So it seemed as though that Joseph wasn't a drinker. And though he liked to gamble, he still was able to maintain a job. And he seemed to be very business oriented like Dora was. And the great thing about Joseph is that though he helped her start this string of brothels, it was never his. He never gets claim for them. Good, because they weren't his. She ran these. This was her business. He just was along for the ride, and he also had his own business. And, getting married to a man who is well standing in the community can be a big, big help, because back then as a woman, you weren't getting shit from nobody, especially if you were considered a fallen one, a soiled dove. So though he is credited on helping her, he never takes claim for any of them. Good for him. Eventually, Dora's original brothel is much of a success, and with a little help from her husband, they come together and open a string of brothels throughout South Dakota. The Dufrans have several houses in Lead, Rapid Cities, Bella Forchie, and Deadwood, of course, making her a very, very successful madam of her day. It is not often that we hear of madams especially for this time period, having several different brothels to operate, So it's kind of cool to see that in this world, is that she didn't just stop at one. She had several, and she made that money. And unlike some of her male competitors, such as Al Swingen, Dora treated her employees very kindly. She was on top of making sure their work environment was safe and clean. On top of that, she paid her employees fairly employees very fairly. In fact, her girls were well overpaid. She at the time went above and beyond for her vice dolls, hiring a housemaid to take care of their laundry and make the girls' bed and tidy their rooms in the morning. She also hired a handyman to maintain the house. Each house also was staffed with cooks to provide the women with regular meals. Diddlin' Dora's was the most profitable house for a while, which was located in Bella Forchi. This house was located near the cattle drives, so cowboys would often stop by for a drink or two, and if they had the funds, a little extra something if they wanted it. Dora was above her time because she was known to create great advertisement and marketing for her establishments. Usually that wasn't something that, marketing and advertisement did happen, but not for brothels, and not enough to definitely not for brothels because it was highly frowned upon. But she was like, I don't care. This is a business and I got money to make. So in fact, one of her famous advertisements that promoted one of her brothels stated that this was the perfect destination for dining, drinking, and dancing, going as far to claim the house was a place where you can bring your mother. The cowboys who frequented her houses confessed they wouldn't be bringing their mothers to such a place. However, that didn't stop them from showing up whenever it was in the budget. Dora made sure her houses were stocked with liquor, food, and the prettiest girls she could find. She made sure that all of her vice dolls were dressed nicely, real nicely, and maintained good hygiene, which for this time wasn't something easily done or found within the brothels in her area. In fact, anywhere probably, because this time was a little bit icky, a little bit stinky, and a little bit dirty. Okay, icky, stinky, and dirty. In general, this was the late 1800s in the wild, wild west, nonetheless. We are talking about, so the cleanliness just wasn't what it is today, nor was the pest control. So, pests were a problem, particularly rats. This wasn't just a brothel issue either. No. Housewives all over were suffering from the infestations of rats. Dora's house was no different, however. Dora just wasn't willing to sit around and do nothing about it. After talking around town, she gets in touch with the local mole skinner. Some kind of conversation has to unfold between the two because it has Patty Thompson going out and paying young boys 25 cents for each stray cat they rounded up. Mousetraps. For the madam, of course, eventually bringing her an entire wagon full of them. That is, of course, according to the legend. Well, if it was a wagon full of cats or just enough to have people talking, either way, the irony of a house full of cats wasn't lost on people, including Dora Dufran herself, who started referring it to her houses as, you guessed it, cat houses, making her be the one to coin the term cat houses. That is, at least to say, that is at least to say she is the one to coin it in this century. History is always murky, and the term cat house, referring to a house of prostitution, could possibly be traced back so long ago. When I was getting into this, there's a hot debate on whether she was the one who coined this, whether she was the one who actually came up with this, okay? And this is what I have to say about that. That I have no doubt that it was probably used before her. Or at least cat was used to refer to, you know what I'm talking about? However, did she know that prior to just the irony of getting pussies and pussies? Probably not. Probably not. She did, though, bring it back into reality in this time and place. 100%. And for that, she gets credit. Though Dora did have competition, history says her biggest competitor was Molly Johnson, who also was a prominent brothel owner in Deadwood. Although they were rivals and competing, there wasn't really any competition, since there was plenty of business to go around. This was a time, like I said, Deadwood was getting their gold rush, so men were plentiful, and a lot of money was coming through those men's hands, and a lot of that money was getting turned over to the girls. Molly had moved to Deadwood just a few months prior to Dufran, though. They ran similar business models and competed for a lot of the big namers coming through town. So, in all intents and purposes, they were competitors, but no big beef between the two. And most likely they were pretty friendly to each other. And though a lot of the day-to-day, sometimes I wish I could just go back to that day-to-day to know, like, because we all, like, have been there. We love the gossip. That's not changed, you know. So what it was like, who was friends with who hated who, why they hated each other. You know, I just wish I could just get into that world a little bit, be a fly on the wall. Nah, I wouldn't even want to be a fly. That's a full-ass lie. I would want to be fully involved, just like taking notes. Tell me everything. I need it all. Historical gossip? Yes, please. I'm here for it. Especially from those that are considered fallen, because they have the funnest history. Allegedly, according to me. Don't come for me. Like, whatever. I think that the girls who are considered fallen lived a very fun life when life was not fun in the 1800s. Not all of them. Some of them, of course, like anything, came to a bad end, but at least they had freedom beforehand, I guess. Anyways, not only does Dora make history in her own right for being a very successful madam and businesswoman and coining terms that are still with us today, she is also unknowingly cementing her name in history by befriending Martha Jane Canarary. Or better known as Calamity Jane, a notable figure for her daredevil ways in the frontier. Known as a friend to Wild Bill Hickok and being a professional scout, she also supplemented her income by selling sex. Okay, and I will admit that I've heard Calamity Jane's name. I'm pretty sure I learned about her, or I wouldn't even say learned about her because she was a woman, but touched on her sometime in history class. However, I'm sad to say I don't really know her story, but don't you worry. that soon will change, since she sold a little sex on the side. We have an excuse to fully dive into her story sooner rather than later. Hint, hint, maybe next week. Anyways, I don't know much about her. Honestly, the most I love about her, and this is so silly, but I love Good Mythical Morning on YouTube, and I also watch Mythical Kitchen, and Mythical Josh does a, going back in history, making meals from history, and he has Emily, who is so fucking funny. Come on. And she plays a character within the time period of the meal he's making. And one of those meals, she played Calamity Jane, but she's just goofy. And so, that's not, historically accurate. I did not know about her much, and I don't know much of her story, but I do know she is considered a historical figure and one of the only woman historical figures. So, we have to go there. But, anyways, they befriend each other, okay? Because at a certain point, Calamity finds herself in Dora's house, working as a working girl, and those two hit it off and become good friends. Well, they might become good friends at this point, but they become acquaintances, and then Calamity's off to do her own thing. So, but they became something because or she just knew that Dora was a good person, because Calamity Jane, when she is worn out and is returning to the Black Hills in 1903, where she is in the final stages and battle of alcoholism, she finds refuge with her old friend, Dora Dufran. Dora hires Calamity again, but this time to work as a cook and a maid in one of her houses, paying her $8 an hour, which I'm assuming for this time, it was a hell of a pay rate. This is, because honestly, Texas is, minimum wage isn't even $8 now. So, yeah. Sad but true. This is where Calamity Jane will stay for the next while and her final few months of her life. And they become really good friends. So much sure that the Dora's name will forever be attached to Calamity Jane, and a woman that in her own right cemented herself in history. And we'll get on more of this later. So, Dora is doing her thing. She has all of her brothels. She's rolling in the dough. Her and her husband are living their best life. They have a couple kids. And everything's going smoothly so far. Not much of drama happens within her brothels. She does, like most madams who are successful, have semi-strict rules, no drinking on the job, which makes sense, and no drinks or drugs, and keep yourself clean, and I'm not clean, wash yourself, bathe yourself and stuff. So it's a bit of a surprise when one morning, a little after 3 a.m. on April 6th, even things are seeming to be going like a normal night at her Bella Forte bordello. That is until a disgruntled ex-employee sets fire to her 2-story home. According to the April 7th, 1906 edition of the Daily Deadwood Pioneer's Time, there was nearly a dozen men and women in the house at the time of the fire, including Dora herself. When the alarm was sounded a little after 3, they had to make a hasty exit into the street, forgetting to grab clothes in their panic. So you can imagine this definitely was some juicy topic, because a fire is started at a bordello, no less, which causes all these men, naked or not, to rush out, to not die in a fire, because get out. So on fire. And so, those articles the next day were just full of the juicy, juicy gossip. The fire, though, was discovered to have been started in the shed in the back of the house where some coal oil was kept. So whoever started it with the coal oil. The fire department responded quickly and with some hard work was able to put out the fire before it spread past the house. However, by the time the fire was put out, most of the interior of the house was sadly destroyed. The next day, a man named Redding was arrested and charged for setting the house on fire. Redding was Dora's former employee who had been fired a few days prior to the fire. And, it was quoted that he had declared he would get even with the owner of the house, which, don't say that. Don't give away the fact that you're going to start a fire. Maybe, if you're going to do a crime and try to get away with it, don't tell people you're about to do a crime. No, actually tell everyone so that we can just so you can easily be put in jail, I guess. So, yeah, it was also said that he'd been arrested prior for arson. So, it was pretty clear who did it in this case. Lucky for Dora, her house of sex and the furnishings were covered by insurance and no one was seriously injured. So even though it was such a scandal and it sucks, in all intents and purposes, nothing bad actually happens. Dora, she would go on to rebuild and her customers would return without a worry to spare. However, that same house is said to have burned down twice more after that. Just odd fires starting. So weird. Although Dora was a very successful madam and a socialite of her time, proper society still looked down on her career, of course, so she was often having run-ins with the law. In 1907, Dora was arrested and fined twice for keeping a disorderly house. Dora's brothel, Coney Island, in the red light district of Rapid City, became not only one of her most successful brothels, but also the one to get the most complaints. She was often in court paying fines, such as the $20 fine she paid in court on February 2nd, 1907, when 10 months later, when the church members decided they wanted to rid the city of drunks, they waged their war on Dora and her house of ill repute. Side note, I've been saying that word wrong my entire life. I thought it was ill repertoire. Don't judge me. All right. I read it. Thought it was ill repertoire. It's ill repute. Okay. Anyways, these church members, of course, couldn't go after saloons or gambling halls or anything like that because technically they were allowed, but they still wanted to rage on someone. And so Dora got it because one, her house was very successful, and two, they didn't like her. She, they just didn't like her. So she was often dealing with them, and they went as far as petitioning the court to have the den, is what they called it, closed. This time, Dora was forced to pay a fine of $300, and it was business as usual afterwards. So it was like they really, really tried, these church members, but then they realized that the city was not going to shut her down because they made money off of her. So then they kind of just gave up and moved on, really. Her life, though, would forever be changed with the passing of her beloved husband on August 3rd, 1908, passing away at the age of 47 at the hospital in Hot Springs after suffering for 6 weeks with kidney issues. He was laid to rest by Dora in the Mount Moriah Cemetery in Deadwood. Dora dealt with his loss in the only way she knew how, and that was to throw herself into expanding her enterprise and love her 2 children she had with Joseph. Business seldom slowed for her, and it wasn't uncommon for her houses to be making headlines one way or another. Like when one of her houses made front page of the July 1913 edition of Black Hills Weekly Journal. This one was over a battle over a customer between 2 of her employees. And this is what I mean. I wish I knew the juicy gossip, because around midnight, Big Jess barged into the room of Jesse Taylor and shot the man in bed, Thomas Jones. She fired it from her .32 revolver, getting Jones on the underside of his palm. It was his left hand, actually. So she got him on the underside of his left hand, and through this fleshy part between the thumb and forefinger, passing all the way through that fleshy part through his palm and exiting near his little finger. So she just shot straight through his hand in the weirdest way possible, too. Which hell of a shot had that been her target. However, she was actually intending to shoot her rival, Jesse Taylor, which is, again, would love to know why. What happened? Did she just steal him, or was she stealing all of your men? What caused this? Big Jess was arrested and taken to jail, and a local doctor took care of Jones' hands. So, as far as bad things going on in houses, her houses really were pretty mellow. Dora's houses didn't run much different than the other madams we have learned about, honestly. Her girls were to remain sober, no drinking on the job, keep themselves clean. Her customers were allowed to partake, but not to the point of drunkenness or unruly. Then they would, if they got to the point of drunkenness or got unruly, if said drunkenness happened, they would be kicked out with a warning. And if it happened again or continued to happen a lot, they would be asked to never return. Okay. And that caused some problems. She had a few guys who would be a little too drunk in the houses, treat her girls poorly. She'd ask them to never come back. They would then become a little stalkerish, try to sneak in, like none of the girls are going to recognize him or something. So that happened a little bit. But other than that, no one seriously ever really got hurt in her house. As far as the drinks she sold in her house, Dora sold beer for $1, which was actually considered to be pretty high for the time. But her house never lacked for customers, and they never really complained. In 1918, the Spanish influenza pandemic struck the Black Hills pretty hard. Just like the others we have learned about, Dora decided to do what she could for her community, closing her brothels to give her full time in becoming a volunteer nurse for Dr. F.J. Gilbert. Immediately started sending her to those too sick to come to the doctor's office. Dora never got paid for this and often would use her own money to buy those who were sick food, bedding, and medicine. When the worst of the epidemic subsided, Dora didn't stop helping those in need. She would go on to decide to convert her Coney Island her Coney Island brothel into a makeshift house for those sick, hungry, and in need. This was about the time that she started to slow down on her brothels. She was getting up there in age, and her passions may have changed a bit. Rapid City Journal is often quoted about how much she contributed to the general funds at supermarkets so the poor could go shop there. She was often donating and just doing what she could for those who were in need, proving once again our historical ladies of the night to be mostly generous, kind-hearted, and giving in nature. Dora will continue to run brothels and be a prominent madam throughout Prohibition even. She, was still a big name even through that time. And in 1932, Dora will self-publish a book about her time with Calamity Jane under the pen name D.D. The book was titled Low Down on the Calamity Jane. It will go on to tell the tale of their friendship and time together and to share what she knew about Calamity. When the World Fair happened in Chicago, which we learned about, what episode was this? Let's find out real quick. Oh, yes, episode 10. What a coincidence. Episode 10 of Vanna Fields. We learned about the Chicago World Fair, which brought a lot of people into business for Vanna, but Dora goes there and she sets up a table to sell copies of her book for 50 cents. However, historians say that she was extremely disappointed over poor sales and that upon returning, she burned the remaining stock she had printed because she was pissed. No one, you have to remember that we now consider Calamity a historical figure, but back in the day, she was still a woman. So, yeah. 2 years later, Dora Dufran's life and story as a madam will come to an end on August 5th, 1935, at the age of 65. Dying from heart troubles in her home in Rapid City, the local newspapers referring to her as an early Black Hills character and praised her many charitable deeds. Dora will be laid to rest beside her husband and beloved parrot in Mount Moriah Cemetery. And this is where Dora Dufran's story ends, but her legacy should live on. I hope you enjoyed getting to know Dora, her life, and how well she did in the business of selling sex. Not only did she find success when she was very young, she was able to be very successful, stay kind-hearted and charitable, never once letting the money or her power get to her head. As far as the good, the bad, and the ugly goes, Dora's story really hovers in the good part of the life in the Wild Wild West. Not only that, but she definitely was able to wield her power for the good, never even batting an eye when it came to using her own fortune to help those in need. Thank you so much for being here for episode 20. I hope you've been enjoying learning about the lives of our historical ladies of the evening. My hope is to bring their stories out of the dark and into the lights, and that it will shed some light on history, what it was like to be a woman in history, but also maybe help think differently on those that history loves to shove into a box and label as fallen or dirty. The more and more I learn about our ladies of the night, the more and more I understand that our history books, even if it's out of lack of knowledge, lie to us when it comes to our women of vice. Less do I see them as victims and more powerful women who chose to take their freedom back in a time when that was not possible. I'm inspired by our ladies of the night, and I hope to continue to learn about all of their fabulous and glamorous stories. Anyways, with that, I hope you consider subscribing to get access to the video versions that come out early on Sunday mornings. And until next time, I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And with that, goodbye.
I got something between my legs that'll make a dead man come. Oh, that. I got something between my legs that'll make a dead man come. Oh.